Hello, everybody.
Yep. Okay. Let me know. We're unmuted?
Yep.
Okay, welcome council to our special meeting tonight. It's going to be a long meeting, so we're going to start it right at 4:30, but I'm going to call the meeting to order. Is there any conflict amongst council members here tonight? Seeing none, I need a motion to adopt the published agenda as printed. Councillor Bowman and seconder, Councillor Bjorkman. All in favor? It's carried, thank you. And I guess we'll move right into reports from administration, and we'll go right to Lori first, the Director of Development Services. Lori?
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our Council this afternoon. I just wanted to provide you with a couple of minutes of an introduction to tonight's report and tonight's presentation to you. So here we are today at about 10 months into completing Council's directive to prepare a climate change adaptation plan, also known as the CCAP, for the town of Essex. Much work has been accomplished to date, and our climate change analyst, Naharka, is here today to share a bit with you about where we are in the process, what we're currently working on, and what you can expect to see from now until February. As you may recall seeing in our quarterly reports to Council, since establishing ICAT, which is the internal team, in January, and the ECAT, which is the external team, in February, the data analysis in identifying the risks and the vulnerabilities in Essex has played an integral role into leading us to this point. So a lot of work these past, especially 6 months since January, since February, March, when we've started to kind of get down to that nitty gritty. So Naharka will actually walk us through what some of these what some of these risks are, the vulnerabilities here specifically to the town of Essex, but also keep in mind that we're currently in that stage of the CCAP where we are ironing out the high level objectives and the specific action items and the associated timelines to completing both the short-term and the long-term action items. So today is just simply a touch point prior to getting kind of that beefy report and the beefy CCAP in January. So moving forward, Council will be presented with that draft CCAP in January. We hope to get you to review, again, the objectives, the action items, and the associated timelines. We want you to provide us with the input and the feedback. And finally, in February, you will be presented with that final plan for adoption so we can get a move on with implementing some of these initiatives. So without further ado, in the Division of Planning Services under the Manager of Planning Services, Rita Jabor, I present you Naharka Bandaru, and Naharka will be available. Rita is also on standby this evening for any questions directed to her as well.
Thank you, Lori. Where is she? Hmm?
Naharka, you're on mute.
We don't see her on.
Oh, she's on.
Oh, is she on?
Yeah,
okay.
but she's on mute.
Naharka, if you can hear me, you have to unmute.
She's unmuted on your show.
Yeah, Lori, looks like we lost her.
Okay, she's just one door away from me. Just one sec.
Rob just went. Rob just went there. Are we unmuted or are we live?
We're not muted. We're live.
How was the weekend, council? Good? Everybody had a good weekend? Good, 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 good.
Sorry, it kicked me out.
Okay, we're all set to go. Anytime you're ready, you can start.
I'm just using mine for notes. I don't know what was happening.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, you're on, Yaharka.
We can hear you.
No, it's the internet over there. It's not from our laptops.
Thank you for your patience, council, Naharka's just, hopefully we've addressed the issue.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Take your time and
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry about that. A little technical difficulty there, but nothing that can be sorted out properly. So through you, Mr. Mayor, with that, I'd like to start presenting tonight's presentation to council. Thank you, Lori, for that introduction. Thank you, council, for being here tonight to view the progress on the climate change adaptation planning process since we collectively met last time face-to-face in November. Next slide, please. I'd like to start with a short background and context for the meeting today. Following Council's direction in November 2019 to commence working on a climate change adaptation plan for the town of Essex, we established the internal climate adaptation team as well as the Essex Climate Adaptation Team, which is the external steering committee. Through the members in each of these teams, as well as senior management within administration, we have updates through quarterly reports, the progress and corresponding details of tasks completed. However, today's intent is to give further updates as well as a chance for council to provide further comments, any further suggestions on climate adaptation, as well as ask any questions. Next slide, please. A great place to get started would be by presenting you with the vision statement for the climate change adaptation plan. The statement was developed based on guidance and recommendations from ECAT members, management, the communications manager, as well as the values and vision determined in the strategic plan for the town. So without further ado, next slide, please. Next slide, please.
we got some technical problems. Let's see. I can look at this. See, that's where we have to be over in council chambers.
Okay, we're experiencing difficulties. I'm going to give Naharka my computer, and I will sit with Rita if there's any questions directed to me. And so Naharka will sit in my chair and be able to provide you with that, the rest of the presentation. And to Shelley, can we back up one more slide?
Okay. The vision statement.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. I really apologize for the technical difficulties, but hopefully we should be smooth sailing from now on. So if we can go to the slideshow, we are looking at the vision statement for the climate change adaptation plan. So the vision statement I'd like to present is the town of Essex will adapt to changing climate conditions and embrace new opportunities for a healthy, vibrant, and sustainable community benefiting residents, businesses, and visitors. visitors. So again, I'd like to restate that this was developed in consultation with administration, senior management, as well as ECAP members, keeping in mind the strategic plan and the vision for the town of Essex. Next slide, please. So let's go over a brief overview of all the tasks completed so far. The direction of this first phase of tasks was to gather climate information specific to the town of Essex. That would be both on the corporate administration side, as well as for the larger community encompassing residents, stakeholders, businesses, government and non-government organizations, to name a few. We conducted impact, vulnerability, and risk assessments, which all help determine the division, department, and sector-specific climate risk within the town of Essex. Using that information, we conducted technical analysis to determine priorities for determining action items. Using all of this information, we have also drafted objectives for this plan, and I will be discussing all of these steps in a little more detail further along the presentation. Next slide, please. So let's go over the completed tasks to begin with, just a little bit further. So next slide. Like stated previously, impact assessments were first conducted with internal as well as external team members. They provided us with a lot of abundant specific information pertaining to their divisions at the town, which included anticipated impacts to their operations, service delivery, workforce, assets, etc., as well as sectors like agriculture, public administration, emergency resilience, local economy, and that was from the ECAT. And all of this we used to define what we call impact statements. We derived a comprehensive list, but here are a couple examples of impact statements on the slide. So extreme heat, cold, and variability due to freeze-thaw cycles resulting in increased damage, frost heaving, culvert freezing, water main breaks, storm sewer freezing, bridge damage, reduced asphalt cycle to infrastructure. Another example would be higher demand on an energy and water for cooling town facilities, municipal infrastructure, private facilities and homes, resulting in increased costs, increased load, and increased maintenance. Next slide, please. We conducted vulnerability and risk assessments to further determine degrees to which each impact would affect various divisions within administration and sectors within the community, how adaptable these divisions and sectors are, and if addressing the impacts would require any more resources. I would like to state that these assessments were a part of the preliminary data collection process that would help us further determine our priorities further down the planning process. Specifically, input was received from all town divisions as well as representatives from ELK and IRCA, Agriculture, Great Lakes, and Chamber of Commerce representative members on the ECAT, as well as Councillor Verbeek, who is the council appointee to the ECAT. To the right is a snapshot of the assessment sheet that was previously presented to council in July's quarterly meeting, just as a reference. Next slide, please. Based on the preliminary data from the assessments and technical analysis process, all the information was combined to and used to produce a list of priorities. Here shown on the slide are just a few examples of the prioritization process. These priorities paved the way forward for determining objectives, tangible solutions, and action items. And the specific data was gathered from town divisions and ECAT, and all of this will be used to create action items. So some examples are heat stress to residents, services, and agricultural production, infrastructure damage from flooding, shoreline infrastructure damage, and emergency resilience to extreme weather events. Now to note is that the results from this risk prioritization determine the themes of priorities, which will dictate the creation of specific action items. There will be a comprehensive list following the results of this risk prioritization. Next slide, please. We also conducted public outreach activities in the past few months. This slide shows you a snapshot of the ongoing feedback form on the ECAT webpage on the town's website, which asks residents to provide input on their experiences with climate impacts in the community. So far, we have successfully received 57 responses, which are being incorporated into the planning process. Next slide, please. The second more recent public engagement activity we conducted is a vulnerability assessment. This was done more so with the intent of education and awareness. We presented 6 different fictional profiles of characters based on expected lifestyles and occupations within the town of Essex, and asked residents to choose any or all of them to respond to. A list of impacts were presented, and the residents were asked to assess the vulnerability to each of the impacts based on the character's occupation, age, and lifestyle. We received 15 different responses to this activity, which is also currently available on the town's website. Next slide, please. As shown a little earlier, we also established a vision statement for the plan, which was presented just a little bit ago, alongside with the guidance and recommendations from administration, including senior administration. We are also in the process of developing corporate and community objectives, which are currently in the drafting stage. The objectives, what they are meant to act as high-level intentions, which our climate change adaptation plan will strive towards. So the expectations of a program or plan, for example, are to, through these objectives, increase public awareness of climate change and its projected impacts on our community, increase technical capacity to prepare for climate change impacts, and increasing adaptive capacity of built, natural, and human systems in our community. Next slide, please. So following a review of all the tasks that have been completed, we'd like to walk you through the current tasks being undertaken in this process. This slide shows you what the current phase consists of, which is finalizing objectives, setting goals and action items, and assigning tools and programs. So we are concurrently performing these tasks. Next slide, please. As mentioned in the slide earlier, we have created a set of draft corporate and community objectives. Examples of objectives are, which are currently in the draft stage, are integrate climate change adaptation into town planning and policy making, strengthening emergency preparedness, promoting engagement and participation in climate change awareness and adaptation opportunities. In the current phase, we have also commenced action item creation already with the internal divisions as well as ECAT members. Wherever data is complete pertaining to a specific department or division at the town or a sector within the community, we are concurrently packaging those action items with associated tools. And by tools, I mean like standard or code revisions or policy creations or incorporating them into existing projects. Now, again, the idea is to identify what the associated code revisions or standards are. The actual revisions will first be presented to council and be adopted as changes following the adoption of the climate change plan. So right now, again, we are drafting what the action item and what the following implementation would look like. Next slide, please. So following that, following the current phase, when we have our action items and the programs and packages that they will be delivered through, what we want to actually do is develop a reporting system, conduct a gap analysis and prioritization, and draft the climate change adaptation plan. I will go into a bit more detail on the next slide. Next slide, please. So what the development of the reporting system would look like is basically to find out the frequency and a template of reporting updates and progress in order to identify how we're faring in our various action item implementations and our project progress. We want to identify what the various indicators would be. So for example, if we have a communication or climate engagement action item, then maybe the number of social media engagements or the number of public consultations or displays at public gatherings, those would be examples of what we would use to indicate progress. We will also be identifying constraints and establishing a timeline for the reporting system. The next step would be gap analysis and prioritization. Now, what that means is to identify, are there any overlaps or are there any parts of the plan that haven't identified crucial impacts? So it's basically just to make sure that we have turned every stone and we've ensured that, redundancies are taken care of, and the plan is wholesome and has touched base along all of the impacts concerning the town of Essex. Based on that, we would also prioritize action items. How do we know what our short-term and long-term goals? How do we know what are immediate action items that need to be taken care of? How do we make sure that the highest priority action items are given the resources that they require? This is the stage when all of that will be determined. And based on that, we will establish an implementation schedule. With all of that information will be drafted into a climate change adaptation plan, which will be the draft document, and presented to first the senior administration. While we will have their consultation throughout the process, the draft will be further combed through by senior administration, and we will be moving on to the next stage, which, next slide, please. Which will be the final tasks. So what that will encompass is, next slide, please, is the final phase, and that is the implementation. So like stated by my director, Lori Chadwick earlier, we are expecting to present council with a draft climate change adaptation plan in January of next year. Following that, we would like to receive any comments, questions, clarifications, suggestions to edit. And following that, we expect to present the final climate change adaptation plan to council by February 2021. Once adopted, the plan is intended to be implemented and in a continual fashion as indicated by the implementation schedule, which will be proposed in the plan. And it's a constant ongoing process from that point on, where we will receive updates through the reporting system and constantly update the department heads on the progress as identified in the plan. Next slide, please. So with that, we are intent to provide you with all of the updates up until this point. Is what we wanted through this presentation. I'd like to thank council for offering the opportunity to present all of these updates. All of this work has been quite crucial in paving the way forward and determining solutions. I'd also like to thank all the ICAT and ECAT members, senior management, as well as everyone else who's provided valuable information. If members of council have any questions at this point, I'm happy to address them. Any suggestions for solutions are also welcome. And if you'd like to continue providing suggestions for solutions post this meeting, you're welcome to do so through council's appointee to the ECAT, which is Councilor Verbeek. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was quite an interesting presentation and a lot of knowledge, or a lot of information there. Thank you very much. I'm going to open up now to council. Anybody from council have any questions, please? I can't see it. Yeah. Questions? No questions? Councilor Bjorkman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thank you very much for all the work that you're putting into this. Is identifying,
Councilor Bjorkman, you're echoing for some reason. I don't know why. ahead. Try it again, Councillor Bjorkman.
Is there still an echo there?
No, you're good now.
Okay. I think I was reading the plan on my phone so I could kind of follow along. I hate not being able to see something on a screen. So I just have this one screen. That must be it. It's when I have the phone open. Again, thank you very much for the presentation. I guess we're identifying issues and things, but now we're into this stage of identifying solutions, what our objectives are, what we're going after. And I just think it would be, I wonder if there's a timeline there, if once those objectives are isolated and kind of those next steps, it would be nice to be communicated that before we get into the final report, just so that once that's been identified, if there are things that we would like to add to that, and we could through Councillor Verbeek send that into the committee, but just having an idea of what those objectives and the solutions that you're looking for, because right now we don't have that level. Right now we're at, okay, we're going to now establish those, and it would be nice to just have a mini report, even if it's just something that's published to us, so that if we've got some ideas through Councillor Verbeek, we could send those to the committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Very good point. Councillor Vanendel, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I agree with Councillor Bjorkman. Thanks very much for the report, Naharka. But I had the same thought. I mean, you know, there's all this jargon and gobbledygook about what we're going to do, but no actual details about what we're going to do. And well, I was asked point blankly by a resident this week. He said, quote, "How much is this nonsense going to cost us?" unquote. His words, not mine. And I said, well, I don't know. We haven't been given any details. So I'm suspecting that this is going to be extremely far reaching in terms of its effect on our lives. And it probably could affect every aspect of the town's finances. I mean, we can't just be presented with some plan that does all that on the last night when we're going to approve it. We need to know in advance some of the major efforts that we will be asked or tasked with, so we can think about it for a while, because we cannot have this dumped on us for a final approval the day we get the report. You know, there's got to be some more signaling way ahead of that. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Verbeek. You're next. Go ahead.
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying not to speak because I've maxed out on Tylenol and it's not touching this migraine. But I just want to clarify for Councillor Vanderdolen that Naharka presented, and it was also presented in our report, that we as council are going to have in January to review far before it back to council in its final form in February.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I misunderstood. I thought it was a final plan for adoption in January. That's the way I took the notes at the beginning. I must have misunderstood the way that was presented. Sorry.
Anybody else from council? Nobody else? Once again, I want to thank you for the report. And I'm going to need a motion to, oh, hold on. Lori, you want to speak? Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So I didn't want to cut you off.
With these technical difficulties, Naharka and I are sharing this camera and mic, so thank you for accepting me here in this fashion. I did want to follow up I do want to say that yes, council will have an opportunity to look at what these budget impacts will be. Please know that there is nothing that we are seeing, or you will see rather, in this budget iteration coming up. So in other words, we need to find out what are the action items, and then we'll put pen to paper to actually figure out what the cost implications will be. And then we'll be able to, for 2022, roll that in potentially into some short-term solutions and long-term solutions and find out what those implications are. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that you won't see any besides what we're already doing. So that's something important as well, what we're already doing to adapt to certain climate change impacts. There is nothing coming out of this plan that you'll see in that budget coming up for 2021, but rather something that will plan ahead.
Lori, you're hard to follow there because you're going back and forth. So you're hard to follow there. So go ahead. I heard what you said, but you're going in and out.
Okay, doing my best. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that. And then in essence, yes, council will be able to review that draft climate change adaptation plan in January. We will not adopt it once council, in other words, if you're not comfortable with the plan, we will be reviewing it internally, absolutely, and having that buy-in from each of our directors and through up to the CAO. It will be ours. It will be ours to own. It will be yours to own and to proceed with implementing those actions. And so we would not bring forward a plan without knowing how do you feel about it. So we want to present you with that draft in January. And if it's not ready for adoption in February, we'll iron out whatever details may hold us back from doing so.
Great. That's great, Lori. That gives us a little bit more leverage here. Okay, thank you very much. Anything else from anybody else? Nobody else? So I'm, Councillor Vandendolen, you had something further? Go ahead.
Just kind of a point of technology. It's not that what we're hearing is the sound is going in and out because the sound is it's pixelating. It happened to Councillor Bjorkman. It happened to Lori. It's not that she was going back and forth. We couldn't hear her because the sound was falling apart on Zoom. Is anyone else experiencing the same bad sound?
I think it's corrected and now, Councillor. Councillor Bowman, were you still experience that?
Just to continue, it seems to be Councillor Bjorkman's connection because it happened to him last week and the meeting before was worse today. Just wanted to point that out for the technical people trying to run this and listening in. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. But Councillor Bjorkman corrected his. We could hear him very clearly after he made the adjustment there. Okay, anybody else from council at all? Okay, I'm going to need a motion to accept the presentation. I'll need a motion, Councillor Bjorkman and Councillor Bowman. All in favor of that presentation? Carried. Thank you very much, council. I think we're done. I guess we can go right into adjournment. So I need a motion to adjourn this meeting. Councillor Vandendolen and Councillor Verbeek, all in favor? And we'll see us all at the regular council meeting. Thank you, council.